welcome to the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors PrecisionHydration.com, electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat. Get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. And also brought to you by Thriver.co, the simple finger prick blood test you can do at home to track hormone, vitamin and mineral levels in your body. 10% off all subscriptions with the code OxygenAddict10. Hello everybody, welcome to the show. I hope you're well. This is the Triathlon podcast that brings you news, interviews, product reviews, and hopefully a bit of inspiration and motivation as well. And I hope you're doing great this week. It feels like things are changing, doesn't it? It feels like things are turning a corner and getting a bit more hopeful. I've got to say, I feel as though I've got my mental capacity back over the last couple of weeks, and I'm inspired to get a bit of training done again. So I've been smashing out the rides on Zwift over the last week or so and absolutely loving it. And I shall be talking a little bit more about that later on in Coach's Couch. This week's interview is with Jordan Rapp. Pro triathlete, he's a winner of Norseman, he's a winner of 11 or 12 other Ironmans as well, including Ironman Canada, New York, and various other ones as well. He was a product designer for Zip, and he now works for Zwift as game designer and product designer there. So really great interview with him, actually. Loads of stuff about his career and his racing. Jordan, quite famously, back in 2011, was involved in a horrific accident where a car pulled out across his path. He went in through the window of the car and severed his jugular vein, and it was only because the car drove off and left him at the roadside basically to die, and it was only because there was a guy coming the other way, jumped off his bike, ran over and basically put his hand inside Jordan's neck to stop his jugular vein squirting blood all over the road. That actually saved his life. So an amazing story of a comeback for him, and he went on to win many more Ironmans as well. But a really interesting guy, still very into his athletics. He's now riding on the track, and as you'll hear in the interview, I think he was National Masters champion over the 3K pursuit last year, and is talking about an attempt on the overall US hour record as well. So very talented, hard-working athlete, and working for Zwift now. Obviously, there's a lot of us on Zwift a lot of the time, so he's got some tips on things that are changing in the game of Zwift to kind of gamify it a bit more. So interesting developments there. All right, first up today, news and results brought to us, sponsored by Precision Hydration. So they've got some very cool stuff going on at the moment. I was very grateful the other day that they've released their, believe it or not, their Precision Hydration colouring book. It's a PDF you can download, you can print it out, and my son was loving colouring pictures of guys on time trial bikes and race cars and all kinds of stuff. So we had a lot of fun doing that. They make electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat, and that means all of us sweat out at different concentrations of sodium, from people who are not that salty sweaters all the way through to people like me who are incredibly salty. My sweat is something like 6 times more salty than the average commercially available electrolyte drink, something like Lucozade or Gatorade. So even if I'm drinking something like that, I am net losing tons of sodium with every hour of riding. So if you're a person who suffers from cramps when you're on the turbo or in the pool, or if you're a person who has, got quite ill and felt sick after a race, especially in the heat, it's a good lead that sodium is the missing element to your training and to your racing. So head on over to precisionhydration.com, take their online sweat test. It's just a few questions, and it'll give you a really good lead as to whether you are a heavy sweater or a salty sweater, both of which are not good for your performance. And it's dead simple solution. You buy some Precision Hydration, you mix it into your bottle. Doesn't taste salty, believe it or not. They don't use sodium chloride like table salt. They use a different kind of sodium, and it just tastes fairly neutral in your drink. It's a quite fruity tasting, pleasant mix, actually. So you can mix it with all kinds of other stuff, and very palatable, and it replaces all of that sodium. So someone like me, incredibly salty sweater, I get cramps in virtually every pool and turbo session that I do if I'm not using Precision Hydration, and every session I use it in, I don't get cramps. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer to keep on using that stuff. I think it's the best electrolyte product out there. So get yourself some, and remember, use the code OxygenAddict15 to get 15% off your first order. Right then, some news from this week. First up, the Outlaw Full Distance in Nottingham in the UK has been cancelled officially this week. Obviously, we knew the news was coming, having interviewed Ian, the race director, last week. I think he was giving us a pretty good steer that it was headed that way. He was very, very hopeful it would get to go ahead, but I think it's just going to be too soon with everything else that's going on. So I'm glad for the athletes' sake that they know now that they've got that cancellation in place. I think that's it for the big summer races in the UK now. So the next thing we've got our eyes on are the September events, really. 70.3 Weymouth, Ironman Wales, and all the other Ironman branded events and challenge branded events that have been shifted back in the calendar to September and October. So keep yourself rolling in training, keep yourself motivated, because those events are coming at some point in the horizon. Okay, so keep moving now, and if you've managed to develop yourself something of a COVID belly, we'll call it. I've got a couple of friendly visitors on my tummy at the moment, a couple of pounds of extra lard that are sitting there looking most unusual, hanging over my shorts at the moment. So I'm trying to make a bit of a change to that and hitting Zwift to try and get in shape. So the carrot of some events in the autumn is something that I'm loving. Okay. However, open water swimming looks like it is back on the agenda, certainly here in the UK from Wednesday of this week, which will be the 14th of May. Open water swimming's allowed back in the UK. So if you're going to be jumping into the open water, just remember, if you've not done it before, you want to make sure that you are, of course, socially distanced, but swimming with someone who's done it before. My advice to you is certainly wear your wetsuit at this time of year because it's going to be cold. Get yourself one of those inflatable float tow bags that goes behind you. They're at 20 quid from Wiggle or other places. It goes on a little belt around your waist. You can inflate the bag with your stuff inside, so you can put your car keys and things like that inside it, roll the end over, snap it shut, and then blow the bag up. And it doubles as a bag to tow your valuables around in, and also to float you around if you go dizzy or you just want a bit of a breather and you hold on to it. I'm a very confident open water swimmer. I've surfed for close to 30 years. I've started using one all the time to swim with, not so much for me, but because I was involved in a couple of incidents where there were other swimmers in the water who needed help. And despite, having trained as a lifeguard back in the day, it's pretty difficult to try and help somebody else stay afloat when they're panicking and, having dizzy spells or, properly panicking that they're going to go under. So with the old float bag with you can just give them the float bag to hang on to and, no drama. So 20 quid, well worth spending. It's also worth getting one of those ones that's fluorescent in colour, I think, because then if, as has been the case for me in the past, I've been swimming down at our local lake that isn't a managed venue. It's just a big open water place we can go and swim in. But someone came down and launched the motorboat as I was midway through my swim, and I felt extremely exposed, even though I was only sort of 10 meters away from the shore. Having that inflatable, brightly coloured thing just lets those people know that you're there if you get caught out like I did. So I know I'm not the only one who's had that happen to them. So just look after yourself and the people around you as well. Okay. Well, the bits of news I've noticed, we've got to take our hats off here to the legend that is, I'm going to call him a legend from now on. Joe Duckworth completed his indoor Decker Ironman. So he did an Ironman every day for 10 days. He replaced the swim with a solid 12 kilometer, 60-minute row every day. He then went on to bike in the region of between 4:45 and 5:30 for the bike leg on Zwift every day. In fact, I think his last ride was down closer to 4:30, if you can believe that, with the guys he was riding around with. And he closed out his last day with a 3:13 marathon for a solid sub 9 hour Ironman, indoor Ironman, on his 10th consecutive day of Ironman. So super impressed with him. I'm going to hope to catch up with him sometime over the next week and get a little snippet with him from the show. But last time I checked, he'd raised over 13,000 quid for NHS charities. Joe, as you'll remember me saying, is a previous winner of the Lakesman Triathlon. I think he went I'm not sure whether he went sub 9. I'm pretty sure he went sub 9 under Lakesman. He's been sub 9 for sure outdoors as well. So very, very talented athlete in his early 50s and extremely hardworking. So hats off to you, Joe. I think you are a legend, sir, and we salute you. It was also good to see another legend of the sport in a different way. Johnny Brownlee was out in Leeds giving out meals for NHS heroes. I think he gave out the 100,000th meal that the charity he was helping out had given out to NHS staff, which were given out for free, which is pretty amazing. Now, I mentioned earlier on that I've been super inspired to get back onto Zwift. I've needed a challenge. I've set myself the challenge of trying to, firstly, trying to ride the height of Everest on Zwift, up the Alpe d'Huez and back down again. Each lap up the mountain's about 1,000 meters. So it's going to be a solid 7 days worth of riding to go up and down and clear that up. 8 days of riding probably to get the 8,500 meters or close to 9,000 meters needed to Everest. And I'm quite taken with the idea of doing the old 50,000 meters and getting one of those fancy Tron bikes as well. So that's what's the carrot that's motivating me at the moment. That, and also trying to shift this unwanted COVID belly off myself as well. So I was riding along on, God, what day must have been? It must have been Sunday morning. And old Lucy Gossage was on there with Nicky Bartlett and a couple of others as well. And they were trying to do the Everest ride, and indeed did complete the Everest ride in one day, in about 11 hours worth of riding, which is pretty damn phenomenal effort. So well done you lot, 11 hours of continuous riding indoors. And then I read about Phil Gaiman. A lot of you will know his name. He's an ex-pro, and he's now sort of a professional Strava hunter, and he runs a really cool YouTube channel. So check that out if you've not seen him before. He went outdoors and Everested outdoors and took the world record for the fastest ascent of, whatever it is, 8,800 meters in 8 hours and 4 minutes. So hats off to you. Absolute legend, man. Last little bit of news I saw is that Ironman have tightened the rules around their VR challenge. So as you know, there's been some, let's say some slightly suspect times on the Ironman VR challenge. They've had little control over where people are doing the ride. So there's been more than one occasion people have started their ride at the top of Alpe d'Huez and, clocked in at 60 kilometers an hour for the 40k ride. So what they've now said is they're going to have only rides indoors on Rouvy to count for it, and only outdoor runs to count for it. And I believe on a circular course where the start and finish are very close together to basically stop people running downhill all the way. And I don't know this for sure, but I've heard a rumor that the reason they're tightening this up is they're going to have kind of two streams of this VR event running. One of them is a kind of, any rules apply, do it however you want, just enter and you can do it on Zwift and ride downhill and who cares what the results are. But they're going to have a competitive version of it. And the rumor is that they're sort of testing this competitive version with the indoor only on Rouvy, outdoor only on circular runs, in order to start looking at perhaps give away 70.3 and Kona slots. So keep your eyes on the developments there. Again, it's only rumors at the moment, but I do know a couple of people on the inside who have rumoured that to be the case, and I think it might be headed that way. So, interesting one for you all to discuss on Facebook and Twitter there. Would you want a slot for Kona? Would you want a slot for the 70.3 World Champs if it could be earned on these indoor events? Would you not want one? Would you turn one down if you won one in the event? How would you react to people around you winning them? It's an interesting question, isn't it? Should it all go ahead? And, the Kona race is moved to February of next year. So, yeah, interesting one. Okay, Coach's Couch this week. We're going to talk a little bit about how things are changing over time with relation to training and COVID. We've alluded to this over the last couple of weeks. Things feel like they're changing for the better. We've obviously seen the infection rate here in the UK and around the world is dropping. The death rate is dropping. It looks like we managed to avoid that horrendous situation where hospitals and ICUs were completely overrun. So this isn't coaching advice. This is just the feel I'm getting from talking with my athletes, talking with other athletes. It seems much more socially acceptable to go outside and ride these days, just from the people I've talked to. I certainly didn't feel comfortable doing it myself for the first 6 or so weeks of COVID. And last week went out for my first outdoor ride, and I've got to say, it was the most unbelievable pleasure. It felt like, talk about your simple pleasures that are given back to you. It was pretty tough going around that first corner when I realized my avatar wasn't going to steer around it on its own, though, I've got to tell you that. But it was really nice being outside in the sunshine, riding through the hedges. Yeah, it was a really, really nice day out. And I even had a ride out Saturday evening on the mountain bike and just went and poodled around, went up the canal, went through Altrincham town centre, which was literally like a ghost town. I saw one other person as I was riding down the main pedestrianised area in Altrincham, despite bizarrely loads of fast food restaurants and chip shops and stuff were open. There literally was only one other person out on a bike that I saw during the whole ride, though. So who was getting the food, I'm not sure. But it feels like things are changing. So within our training plans, we're moving back toward normal. In our next block, we're going back to having athletes do a couple of harder sessions a week, 90% sort of sweet spot type efforts in one session. We're going to do a 10-mile time trial in the other session. And again, ease into it, start at 90% week 2, 95% week 3, 100% of FTP. So again, well below what you would be able to going flat out for a 10-mile TT. But the way we're looking at it is a way to sort of ease into finding out probably where your realistic FTP is at the moment for athletes who've not done an FTP test for 8, 10, maybe 12 weeks. So we'll do 10-mile time trial at 90% of FTP, whatever you consider that to be at the moment. And we'll kind of find our way into where we, feel our way into what we think FTP is going to be at the moment. And again, we're starting to look at doing longer rides and longer outdoor rides. And I think it feels like there needs to be less concentration on the idea of protecting your immune system at all costs and more toward the idea of let's try and balance your mental health with doing things that you need to do and giving yourself some physical challenges. And who knows how it'll develop over time. But I thought I'd share that with all the listeners who are not members of the team and not being coached by us, just so that I said right from the early days, I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and it's not going to be dogma. It's not going to be something that we stick to forever. But as things change, I think it's important that we all talk about it, and we talk about it with our training partners and see how it feels for us. Personally, we're still staying away from running really hard. I think that's an unnecessary stress at the moment. And we're doing some hard work on the bike. But again, more for a sort of the mental benefit of feeling good rather than the training effect of hammering yourself at FTP at the moment. And again, that might be different in 4 weeks' time, but that's where we are at the moment in the team with the athletes we coach. That's kind of our thinking at the moment. If you are interested in getting some coaching, if you want a structured training plan at the moment and you feel it's something that will give you a little bit of structure and focus during the times when there's all kinds of confusion going on, you can come and join Team OxygenAddict and get coached by me within there. If you join in the month of May and take out an annual membership, I'm going to extend your annual membership all the way through to the end of September of 2021. So you'll get all of this summer for whatever races happen, and all of next summer as well, all the way through, Ironman Weymouth, 70.3 Weymouth, Ironman Wales, Ironman Italy, all those races in September next year. So essentially 2 race seasons for the price of 1. Get your structured training in place now and then really be in top shape and ready to go in 2021. So if you're interested in any more details about that, there's a link in the show notes. You can either click on that if you want to join up, or you can book a Skype or phone call with me to talk things through, and we'll see if you're a good fit for the team. So yeah, get on that. You can also come and join us and have a taster of our training on our Zwift ride, Tuesdays at 7:15 p.m. UK time. It's called the OxygenAddict Triathlon Podcast Power Hour. You can just select it from the events menu in the top right-hand corner. Just get yourself there 10 minutes or so before. So from sort of 7 o'clock onwards on Tuesdays UK time. The workouts are sort of aimed at giving you a structured interval session that's going to raise your FTP and make you a faster, more powerful bike leg. an all-round athlete, really. Okay, so the interview of the week is sponsored by Thriver.co. They do at-home finger prick blood tests. So for athletes, you can get things tested like your iron levels, your testosterone levels, your hematocrit, your liver function, vitamin B9, vitamin B12, vitamin D, in fact, all of your vitamin levels. And if you're interested in health tracking, you can get things tracked like thyroid function, diabetes, cholesterol, omega-3, omega-6, anything and everything you can want. You can select from a drop-down menu and add in and take away. Everything's really clearly listed and clearly priced, and you can just have a one-off test, or you can set up a subscription to have that every 3 months, every 6 months. I personally have one done about every 4 months and just check in on myself and make sure the levels where they are. And it's really good for me when I was, sort of 6-8 months ago, feeling really unwell, and discovered that I had extremely low vitamin B12 and vitamin D levels, and was able to supplement and change my diet and get those back on track. And ended up feeling awesome again. So I'm very thankful to those guys. I highly recommend them. And you can get yourself 10% off with the code OxygenAddict10. All right, so that's all our sponsors done. That's all of our news and reviews for this week. So let's go over to our interview of the week with Jordan Rapp. All right, we're live. Jordan, welcome to the show. It's lovely to have you on, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Well, first, whereabouts are you in the world? I know you mentioned it was 7 o'clock. Are you West Coast?
Yeah, I live outside of LA, in the suburbs, about an hour from Zwift headquarters, but haven't been there in a while now. So right now I'm basically stuck at home like everybody else. But I live in a beautiful area, a town called Thousand Oaks. Moved here about, 11 years now almost. Mostly because the training here was really good. Moved here, sort of came down to do some training before a race, and then just kind of never left. Great area for swimming, biking, and running, and now it's a great area to raise a family. So
fantastic, man. Well, listen, let's start by talking about your pro career and your adventurous pro racing career, because you were always one of the guys who I mentioned in the pre-call. I always used to love reading your blogs. I used to love following your racing. And I also loved the fact that it seemed from your writing that although you enjoyed winning traditional Ironman races, what seemed to really fire you up was the crazy, adventurous, sort of slightly out there races that were around at the time, things like the Epic Man and things like that. And I was reading on your blog just before I came on here. I didn't know this, but you've been over and done Norseman as well. So there's obviously you've got a huge wealth of experience to tell us about the crazy races. So let's start by asking you, what was the favorite race you did in all of your time racing?
I think probably the Ironman Canada on the Penticton course would be my all-time favorite race. A lot of that is that my wife is from Penticton.
Okay.
So that was like a hometown race for me. So like it was the first Ironman that I won, and then after I had my bad car accident, then it was like the next Ironman that I won, sort of like coming back. And so, and both times we were living in Penticton, when I won it. And it's funny, if you go, they have this awesome, they have like a sort of a celebration plaza. They have these like, I think they're bronze plates in the ground that has the name of every winner. And it's funny because if you look around, like I have two in 2009, it says Jordan Rapp USA in the time. And then in 2011, I guess they had like taken, so it says Jordan Rapp Canada. Right. So it's funny that like, you're like, wait, did he change nationality? I mean, the answer is no, I didn't. And I am not a Canadian citizen, but I guess the town of Penticton felt like they owned me enough that I could be called a Canadian.
They'd officially adopted you. That's when you know you've really made it, man. When the hometown claim you as one of their own.
Yeah. So I would, that was the race that I think I really felt defined. I think put me a little bit like on the map, so to speak, and then I think kind of proved that I was back. And then I think it was always the race that, like, when I thought about the types of courses that I like to race on, the type of that is a good, hard, slow kind of grind course. And I think that was always the type of course that I did best on.
Okay. Well, how did you get into triathlon in the first place then? What was your entry into the sport?
I was a rower in college, a pretty good rower. And then I was hoping I had been sort of on the cusp of making the U.S. national team through college. And then afterwards, I think like most people that are in Olympic track sports, like I thought, see if I could give it a go to try and make the U.S. team for it would have been Athens 2004. And, didn't left the structured environment of a collegiate team and didn't really have a good grasp at that point of, training methodology, and just, I thought, oh, I know what I'm doing, right? I've done this for 4 years, and I definitely didn't know what I was doing and didn't do a very good job of kind of managing myself, and ended up getting injured, and then sort of realized that I wasn't going to have a chance. This would have been 2002, 2003 kind of window. So I was thinking, okay, I need to kind of take a break from rowing, but I do want to stay fit if I'm going to have a chance to kind of like get back. And so I knew a couple of triathletes that, like I had a road bike, used it as cross training for rowing, and I knew some other triathletes that some other rowers that did triathlon. And so I thought, oh, like that'd be all right. I thought about bike racing, but I went down, I knew nothing about drafting. And so when I asked how fast they went there, and like, there's a local crit, and they were like, I don't know, 40K an hour. And I was like, I could never ride that fast. I guess I better try something else, And so I ended up trying triathlon and had some pretty good success in local races. And the local coach was like, you're pretty good, you should become a pro. And I thought, I am pretty good, I should become a pro. And thankfully, like, we were both ignorant enough that it actually seemed like a good idea in spite of being a terrible idea. And sort of by the time I realized it was a terrible idea, I was good enough that it was no longer a terrible idea.
Had you had any kind of swimming background before you went into triathlon?
I mean, I grew up swimming, but I did not grow up a swimmer, right? Like I grew up, I was we grew up swimming in lakes and all of that. So I was comfortable swimming in open water. I didn't have like fear of open water, and I certainly knew how to swim, but I was not a competitive swimmer. I was always a competent swimmer, right? Like I think, I started doing a little bit of swimming even when I was actually still in college, just for rowing, for kind of some upper body, and I would say at that time, if you were just like, I think the first time I got in, probably for a 1500, I would have been sub 30 minutes, right? So not like setting the world on fire, but also obviously like able to, I knew how to flip turn, right? Like I knew all of that stuff. So, could swim all 4 strokes, kind of relatively badly, but like at least like if you were like swim, like the butterfly, like I sort of knew what that meant and how to do it. So, from that standpoint, right, like it was always the weakest, but I certainly came in as a competent swimmer.
Yeah, okay. And then when you got into triathlon, then what was the distance that fired you up initially? Were you initially coming in thinking Olympic distance and your eyes got drawn further north, or were you immediately someone who thought, right, long distance is where it's at for me?
No, I mean, I had come from rowing, right, in 6-minute races. So, I mean, the idea of even like a sprint race was quite long. And I, as a rower, right, I had wanted to go to the Olympics, and then you saw that triathlon was then an Olympic sport. And I thought, oh, maybe that's the way that I can sort of fulfill this Olympic dream. And I think that was definitely my focus for, I think, quite a while, until I had sort of done some of the bigger Olympic distance races, and I just saw like how important the swim was, and how fast the run was, and sort of that my strength at the time, which was really cycling, was kind of less important, for draft, and also just the difficulty into getting into draft legal racing, right? I think once I started to understand like the difference in the mechanics, it was like, oh, that's a very different sport. And so I think then I sort of was drawn a bit to half Ironman, which seemed at the time, very long for me. But I thought, that was where I would kind of stay for a while. And then, I think when I did my first Ironman, it was really by chance. Like I literally signed up for the race on a Friday, and the race was on Sunday.
No way. Come on, there's got to be more of a story to it behind it than that. How do you end up signing up for a race on a Friday and racing on the Sunday?
So I had been doing, this was 2007. I had been doing I knew, it was clear then, right, that I was sort of more suited towards longer distance.
Sure,
and I had
yeah.
been racing this series Tri 101. It was, I forget who put it on now. And they did the first race down in Florida. And I had gone down and had a bit of a mishap there. But then the second race was in this place up in Northern California, beautiful, this area called Clear Lake, which I still think, I hope they ever bring a race back there. I mean, it's like very hilly, brutal bike course. And I ended up having a very good race there, finishing second. I think I made $6,000, which was like far and away the most I'd ever made. It was a great series. I think, they had good prize money. It was a good distance. It was like I think it was something like, it would be like a 6 hour, kind of similar to like the IT long distance type of distance.
Okay.
I want to say, yeah, like a 3K swim, 130 or 40K bike, and then maybe like a 30K run.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Okay.
It was 101 miles total.
Right. Got you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then basically I had been planning to do then the third race in the series. And then I got this notice on a Wednesday that I guess the sponsors had pulled the money out, and they were just like, we're canceling the whole series. And I thought, like, well, what am I going to do? And then I was at the time living and training in Victoria, British Columbia with Simon Whitfield. And Simon was like, Ironman Canada's on Sunday. You should do that. And I was like, that's crazy. This was on a Wednesday, right? And then I was like, so then I wrote to some people that I knew, and I was like, do you think I could actually get into the race? And they were like, we can ask. And so asked, and someone asked on my behalf, asked Paula Newby-Fraser, and she was like, yeah, fine, like, give him a slot, it's not a big deal. And I mean, this was fortunate, right, that Victoria's, less than an hour flight from Penticton. And then I was like, and I sort of thought about it, I was like, that's crazy, I shouldn't do that. And then like literally on the Thursday, I'm like, maybe, right? And then like Friday, I ended up talking with Dan Effield, and he's like, on that day, on a Thursday night, I think, he's like, you should do it. And then Friday morning, I wrote back and I was like, can I still have entry? And they said, yes. My now wife was back living in Penticton. And I said, Jill, can I come stay with you? And she said, of course, right? So I literally, thankfully, right, it's such a short flight that I booked a flight for like 2 hours from the end.
Okay.
And then basically book a flight, pack up my bike box, fly out. I missed the pro briefing and everything like that. So I had on Saturday, like a one-on-one pro briefing with Paula. And she was like, okay, forget all the other stuff. You know what it is. She's like, don't make us look bad. Don't make a fool of yourself. Right. Finish. I was like, okay. Right. Like that was like her briefing, right? Like those 3 rules, right? Like, make Ironman, like don't make Ironman look bad. Don't make yourself look bad, and make sure you finish. Right. Like, so basically, essentially, don't embarrass anybody.
Good rules for life, man.
Good rules for life. And then, of course, in typical fashion, right, like there's these couple cobbled sections like early, like where Penticton has these brick, and this was like back in the days before like there were good bottle, like the really tight bottle cages and everything, and I had ejected like one of my bottles going over these things, and then like sort of stop and get the bottles back in, and then I'm writing, there's another one, and I'm like, I'm going to lose my bottles again. So I basically go one-handed, and I put my hand back, and I ended up then crashing. So I'm like less than a K into the bike ride, and I crash, and I'm bleeding from my arm. And all I can think is like, don't embarrass yourself, right? Don't embarrass Ironman, and make sure you finish. So like, I'm like, I'll be fine. I look at my elbow, I'm like, the swim is done. I don't need my arms anymore. It'll be fine. I kind of like hang my elbow out into the breeze. The wind dries the blood. I ended up getting stitches afterwards, but it was fine. I ended up, I think, coming off the bike in third, and then ended up basically getting passed in like the last like 3K by 2 guys. And so it was the guy who won was like way out ahead, and second place was pretty far out ahead. And then it was like 1 minute between third and fourth, and then 1 minute between me fourth and then me in fifth. And that was how I got started doing Ironman racing.
Wow. That's brilliant. Well, I was looking back over your career and the races that you've won for people who don't know. So you won Canada. Did you win it twice or 3 times?
Yeah, twice. The third, 3 wins in Canada.
It's Mont Tremblant, wasn't it? The third one.
And that was the third.
You also had a win at Arizona, ITU World Long Distance Championships win. You had a win at Texas. You had the win at New York, which I'd love to talk to you about because I think a lot of people racing now don't even know that Ironman New York happened, and it was in Manhattan, right? So
Yeah.
so talk us through that. That was like a one and done event, wasn't it? So
Yeah, I mean, it was a race that I had not planned on doing it. I mean, I'm from New York, like literally, like this was
that really
like I
was your
could
hometown
see the
race.
swim course start like almost from like my parents' house where they still live,
Yeah.
right? And so it was, and so, but they talked about the logistics and the bike course. I didn't think when they talked about how it went was not awesome, and I was like, I don't know that I want to do that. And then when they first announced it, I was like, okay, it's sort of hometown, but it doesn't seem like it's a great. I wasn't. Yeah, it just didn't really captivate me. But then I went, and this was before I went to Texas, and then I went and I ran in Texas, and I finally broke 250 for the marathon. And I thought like, okay, like I should go to Kona, but at that point it was the KPR system, and I thought the only way I'll go is if I have a lot of points. And so New York was a championship race, right? It was the U.S. championship, and so I thought, okay, if I go to New York and I win, right, like those two wins, Texas and New York, like there's no way I won't go. So I made a plan, then to do it. It ended up being a really good course. The bike course was way harder than I thought it would be. The run course was just brutal. It's like New York in mid-August. So, I mean, like I remember racing Kona after that, and it was like, it didn't even feel hot in Kona compared to New York in August. And I think once I sort of got my head around the idea of like, what if somebody else won Ironman New York, right? Like this is like I mean, Penticton was like a hometown race, but I mean, like this is like where I was born and raised, right? I was like, I can't really imagine somebody else winning. So I think once I sort of got into it, I was really into it. I'm of all the races that I've done, I can't believe that I had ever thought about not doing it, right? Like, and once I did it, I was like, I'll probably always race this. And then, got canceled. I think I ended up not racing well in Kona that year, but that was because I think I had a contractual agreement to do the Leadman series. And I really, really enjoyed that. But doing, an 8+ hour race 3 weeks before Kona is not all as deal.
Well, listen, tell us about that then, because in fact, does the Leadman Epic Tri still exist? Was it one of those ones that, no.
Yeah, I seem to have a long history of like I'm the only winner of Ironman New York, and I'm the only person to ever win a Leadman Epic 250 race. So I won the first one in Las Vegas, and I won the second one in Bend, Oregon, and they had a 125, like a half distance in Vegas, because they said the full distance in Vegas was too hard. Which I was like, really? What? No, like it was awesome. But so no one else has 3 races that I will be forever the course record holder.
So what were the distances of the Leadman race then? Because I remember reading your report about this at the time on Slow Twitch, and it was some ridiculous single loop bike course.
Yeah. So I mean, the Bend course was a kind of 2 inner loops, but the one in Vegas was just this huge out and back in Lake Mead State Park. I mean, so it was I think 5K swim, 223K bike, and then like 14 or 15K run. It ended up being 250K. That's where the came overwhelmingly on the bike, right? But it was a long swim, longer than an Ironman swim. It might have been 4K swim, something like that. 5K seems long. I don't remember exactly. And then you had this huge loop. Like this, you went out in Lake Mead. I mean, it was, I want to say, like almost 4,000 meters of climbing, right? So well over 10,000 feet. And I think it was, the average temperature was like just a shade under 100, right? Like 36, 37 Celsius on the one in Bend. Then of course it was 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So like minus at the start. So very different races, between those two. But the Vegas one was really the one that I thought that they should have kept. I mean, it was easily, I think, the hardest triathlon in the whole U.S. I mean, like that time, that bike course just so crazy.
Yeah. And was that the one you got a big belt buckle for completing? Did you get a huge
second one, the one in in Vegas, they didn't really have like any kind of trophies. But then it was a Lifetime Fitness, and then Lifetime Fitness ended up buying the Leadville cycling race, and so they kind of wanted to make Leadman like the equivalent. So they did the belt buckle thing the second year. Yeah, so I have this huge belt buckle.
Right. Okay. And then what year was it that you went to Norseman?
So that was actually like basically Norseman was the last race that I did. I ended up racing in Santa Cruz, like a half Ironman, but mostly because a friend was racing, and like, I was, I knew was retired, and I thought like, it'd be good to just kind of go and have one last go. But I mean, Norseman was the last race I really like prepared for, and that was sort of 2017. I mean, I got back from Norseman and sort of, reconnected my phone. Had like put it in a different SIM, right? Because I was over in Europe for almost a month.
Okay.
I raced in Iceland, and then went to Denmark and hung out in Denmark for a while, training with my coach, and then went over to Norway, and then went actually back to Iceland with a friend of mine who had come to be my crew for Norseman, and we spent I think 3 or 4 days in Iceland, kind of on the way I did like Norway and then Iceland. So I did some sightseeing and stuff. So I was away and got back and basically pop in my regular SIM and see some text messages from John Mayfield, founder, creator of Zwift, being like, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something. And that ended up being the job offer that I took. So basically, Norseman was the last race I did, and essentially retired from being a pro and started working at Zwift 2 weeks later.
What a way to retire, hey? Well, listen, I want to come back to Zwift in a minute, because we've kind of skipped over a big part of your story, which was, and I don't know the exact year, was it sometime 2009 when you had your...
2010, March 23rd.
You had your big bike crash. So Tell us a story of that, because I remember reading reports for this at the time and thinking, you're lucky to be alive, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the story would have to be pieced together, right? Like I don't actually know what happened. But essentially I was riding, a car pulled out in front of me. I hit it and went through the side window, and the glass basically severed a bunch of the veins on the side of my neck, and guy drove off, and I was sort of just left in the middle of the road, just bleeding out. And then a Navy enlisted man coming back from the naval base that was sort of down there, and basically he just stuck his hand, as he said, I stuck my hand inside this softball sized hole in your neck, felt for something pulsing, and pushed down, and then he just sort of held me there until the ambulance arrived, right? And
wow.
I think that lost like 3 liters of blood, and they said they probably had another 2 minutes if he hadn't intervened, and it took about 8 minutes for the ambulance to arrive. So 8 minutes is way longer than 2 minutes. So there's a question that I would have died. And I thought I was done with bike racing. Certainly riding indoors was not a thing at that point, right? I mean, some people did it, but they were weird. Right? So getting back on my bike was a huge challenge. It took me a long time before I even thought I wanted to get back on my bike. And so, I mean, it's strange, right? I mean, it was, just over 10 years ago now, and it doesn't feel like that. I think there is a lot of, I'm super glad for Zwift as a way for people who, I am unfortunately in touch with a lot of people who have been in similar accidents, sort of with the, how did you get back on the bike? How did you sort of, and I feel very fortunate to be able to give them some advice that's hopefully not all bad. And, but I think it's nice that Zwift is around as a way to provide a path back to normalcy, right? Like I remember riding and, trying to watch a movie on this kind of clunky, fluid trainer. And I was like, this is not fun, right? I'm not going to make it, I am not going to make it back doing this, right? Like I have to ride outside. That's why I do this, right? Like I do this so that I can go ride my bike, for a living kind of thing. But it was a huge challenge to kind of finally get back. And it took a long time too, because for a while, because of damage afterwards, I had a really bad break in the collarbone. And so it was like, I couldn't ride outside. So I basically wasn't riding, and I think that's where I look at, people now where it's like, they can just get back on their bike. Trainers are better. You have, not just Zwift, but I mean, there's a ton of other options as well. I mean, riding inside is now a thing in a way that it wasn't then.
Yeah. Yeah. How hard was it for you, and how long did it take you to get back to the point where you felt comfortable riding outdoors? Because I mean, that's a traumatic event that's happened to you. If you even just put the crash aside, it's a horrible trauma to go through and try and recover from, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I've never gotten totally back to kind of putting it. I never would say I put it behind me in that regard, right? Like, say, I'm always aware, and I think I was really glad when kind of gravel became a thing. Like I ride probably 8 to 10 hours a week now. It's sort of like I don't run anymore, which I miss a little bit, but I do quite enjoy kind of focusing on cycling. Swimming, I don't think anybody's doing that because the pools are closed. But yeah, I mean, but I really, cycling was the thing that I sort of did. That's how I got into triathlon, because I had come there. It was away from rowing, so cycling was I actually thought I would stop cycling as soon as I retired. Because of my accident. But the reason that I have kept cycling is because of Zwift, and then because of gravel, where I live quite close to quite good trails, and then I've picked up riding on the track. So I ride probably 8 to 10 hours a week, almost every week. And of that, probably less than an hour is on the road.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
and that's because I just, I wouldn't, I don't have any desire to sort of spend a lot of time on the road.
Yeah, and I can totally understand that. Well, listen, you just touched there on the fact that you did a little bit of track riding, which I think is a lovely, humble way to skirt over the fact that you were 2019 Masters National Track Champion in the 3K pursuit. Is that something that you really enjoy now? Something completely different and probably quite close in time to the original rowing race that you came from right back in the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love riding the track. I think Masters Worlds was going to be my focus this year. Come over to Manchester. I thought, looking at the times, I had quite a good chance of winning that. I think I'm interested in taking a crack at the hour. I think the U.S. hour record is still like no U.S. time trialist really. Tom Zerbel holds it, but he didn't really do a track focus, right? I mean, he rode like a modified, road bike. You know what I mean? Zerbel has a huge engine, but I was basically riding a road skin suit and, on a road TT bike. I mean, not, I think it's definitely, it's a big mark, but it's not crazy. But I think I would go sort of shooting for the U.S. hour record with the idea of like, at the very least, the 40 plus, and I will be 40 this summer, which is crazy to think about it, but the 40 plus hour record I think is certainly doable, which would be fun. And but I mean, I think the hour, like I had sort of thought I might do it at some point, but I think now who knows what racing there will be. So I'm sort of thinking like, well, rather than not being able to race at all on the track this year, might give a go in the fall at the hour, although I don't know when the track, I haven't been on the track now in 6 or 7 weeks. And, obviously you can't do something like the hour if you haven't had any track time. I mean, fitness is great right now. I'm in great shape from, riding, Zwift, and I have, but it's different. But I think there's a lot of opportunity on the track. And I think that riding on the track is, again, like, there's no fear of cars. Right, like you can just really focus on riding your bike, and I love that. And I think track is a little bit difficult in that you have to live somewhere where there is a good track. And I mean, that's where I never would have gotten into it, except that one of the best tracks in the world is 10 minutes from work, and I ride there all the time. I ride there basically. I go to the track early in the morning and then ride for 90 minutes or so, and then head to work.
Okay. How far is the hour record, the US hour record? How far are we talking?
It's 53, I think, basically 53,300 would get it. I think it's like the current one is, I think, 53,278 or something like that. But I mean, I think you can see, like, I mean, most people, like, you looking at Tom Zerbel, I think, figure he probably was like 440 watts or something for the hour, where you think like, whoa, that's crazy. But then, of course, Zerbel is a huge guy. And then I think if you look at, Dan Bigham, and who watt bike guys, right? Like, I mean, Dan just rode over that. I think Dan rode 53.5 in Derby on like 350 watts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, I think
the aerodynamics, the kit, the skin suit makes a huge,
right. I mean,
huge deal, doesn't it?
I think Dan is smaller than I am, right? Like I'm quite a bit taller, but I still think, right, that, and Derby is not a fast track, right? Like if Dan had done a similar effort in Aguas Calientes, right, I think he probably would have gone, 54 high, right? I mean, maybe 54 and a half,
wow.
Right? And so I think, can I do, 370, for an hour? I think, at altitude, I think that's probably doable.
Okay.
And I think with a much better equipment setup than Zerbal, I think like, that 53, 53.5 plus is, 54 plus maybe is doable, right? So,
okay. Well, you were always a guy who seemed well ahead of the curve in terms of aerodynamics, self-kit testing, bike position. I know you did some work with Zwift. I don't know exactly what work you did with Zip. And you were constantly posting the stuff up on Slow Twitch of your tinkering with your position. And I think you were one of the first guys who had that kind of hands high, chin down position that, really seemed to pay dividends for you. Was that something that you really sort of applied your engineer's brain to, the puzzle of working out the aerodynamics?
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to actually sort of, fall into meeting and knowing, and then working with Dan Empfield, and I think Dan really pioneered, TT and triathlon bike fit, and I think,
yeah.
You saw Dave Zabriskie, this was sort of early days, right, on his TT bike, and you were like, that's what it's supposed to look like. And essentially it was just like, I just had all these pictures, and you would see like, and Dan I remember would say, right, and I ended up sort of teaching bike fit with him, right, and he's like, you look at these guys, and all the guys that are winning these time trials, they all look the same.
Yeah.
Right? Like they all have this forward head down, right? And so, I basically just kept working until my position looked like that. Had some help from John Cobb, and I think just kind of fell into having that position. And some of it was, I was tall, like, I'm almost 190 centimeters, right, 6'3", and so, like I needed to be aero because, not like some smaller guys where you can get away a little bit, and so, but I couldn't, and so I think, engineer brain, and then I think some folks that knew a lot about bike fit and aerodynamics, lucky to kind of come into contact with them, and I think that's sort of where it came from. And I think the thing is that I didn't realize how important it was, and how I didn't realize how much focus I had put on that until sort of at the end of my career, when like all these other people basically caught up to me and then surpassed me, right? I think like Sebastian Kienle and Jan Frodeno both, like they did such a better job, and I sort of thought like, oh, I've taken care of that, right? And like those guys, were just continuing to take advantage of, velodrome and wind tunnel testing, right? And testing different kit, and like different positions. And I think you can definitely get too far along in terms of tinkering, right? But I think I sort of was like, I had success as someone who had refined that. And I thought, like once I let my position be good enough, I think it no longer was really an advantage, which was too bad. And I think getting back on the track, right, and now doing a lot of testing, like I could have gone so much faster if I had not stopped doing that, right? Because on the track, I've shaved, more than 10% off of my, drag coefficient through position modifications and equipment modifications. I mean,
wow,
probably 15 to 20% of where I sort of started, like, because I started running the track as the way that I raced triathlon, and, position now is quite different and way faster.
Wow. Any temptation to make a comeback in the triathlon world? Has that ever flickered through your brain?
It did once. I mean, my wife still has, we still go back to Canada. Like I hadn't gone back for a long time, but my wife is Canadian, likes to go back, and then basically took a week off from work last summer and went back to Penticton, with the family, and just sort of got back out on the Ironman course there when they had announced that Ironman Canada was coming back. And I thought, I would come back for this, right? Like I would come back for Ironman Canada, but that was when I was there. Right?
Yeah.
And I was a week off from work and, like nothing but riding, sort of go down to the lake. And then as soon as I sort of left and went back home, I was like, it kind of faded again. Right. I a lot of it is just so much time, right? Like I am fantastic. I'm so much faster as a cyclist now than I was when I was doing triathlon, in large part because, right, it's all I do. And of course, when you're not tired from running, you can ride a lot faster. But it's also, I think, it feels like I'm not tired all the time, right? Like I spent, 10 years where I was basically always tired. And now I'm not, which is pretty nice. And I don't know if I could go back to that. And I don't have any sort of desire to just be like a participant. Like, when I thought about like, I would go do Canada again, it was like, I would go do Canada again to win it again. And I figured like I could, sort of knowing what I know now about what didn't work for training, like I think I could probably get pretty far on like, 15, 16 hours a week, right? Like I would basically keep riding just the same way that I'm doing, and then probably, 3 hours in the pool and then maybe 3.5 to 4 hours of running, which is from a relative standpoint, not a ton, but I think about basically doing twice as much training and then also being tired, like, and for what, right? Like to win a 7th Ironman, like what does that really? Yeah. I like what I do now. Like I get a lot of satisfaction out of what I do now, and there's nothing left on my bucket list, right? Like the only thing would be to go win Kona, right? And that's not going to happen. So why?
Well, let's talk about now then, because you mentioned earlier the text that came through the minute you swapped your SIM card over, and it says, "Hey, come and talk to me about a job at Zwift." I was one of the, you mentioned earlier the thing about only weird people ride indoors. My dad was one of those weird people. I grew up with a dad with a turbo trainer set up in the garage all the time, and I always thought that was just normal. So I've always ridden indoors. And when Zwift came along and the beta test group was put out there, I thought this was the best thing since sliced bread when it first came out, and I was riding around and there was just me and 10 others and ghosts on the road all the time. I thought this is the potential for it's brilliant, but never could have foreseen it growing the way that it has done. And, the potential for having races on there, for having professional races happen. It's gone nuts, hasn't it, over the last 18 months in particular. So talk us through how you ended up working there and what your job is there.
Yeah, so I rode Zwift for the first time at the end of 2015 as part of I was a big proponent of World Bicycle Relief. That was, I think, in addition to winning races, right, the other thing that I'm most proud of, I raised almost $600,000 for World Bicycle Relief during my career, and they did a big fundraiser every year on Zwift. And so I got this message, like, this I think was the first time, and they said, we're doing this fundraiser with this thing, Zwift, would you lead an hour ride? I thought, oh yeah, no, I can do that. I have a computer, right? Like I have a setup, I have a power meter, I have a trainer, right? I was like, I could do that. So I did, but I didn't really, I was like, okay, that was fine, and so I wrote it, maybe 2 or 3 times at the end of, I wrote a couple times to get ready. So I was like, let me make sure I actually understand what the heck this thing is. And then at the end of 2015, and then was like, okay, and then didn't ride it again. I think I actually missed the 2016 edition where they asked me to ride again, which would have been the next time I would have ridden on Zwift. But I was like, ended up traveling, couldn't do it. But then in the beginning of 2017, it was a relatively wet winter in Southern California, and so I was like, and I really don't like riding outside in the rain. Not because I don't, nobody loves riding in the rain. I don't mind riding in the rain. What I don't like is riding in the rain with California drivers who are not used to driving in the rain.
Right. Yeah.
And so, ended up being like, I got to ride, but can't don't want to go ride outside in the rain just because I don't really feel safe. And especially it gets, this was January, so it gets dark much earlier. And all right, fine. Like, I'll use that Zwift thing. And at first, it was solely by necessity, and it took a while, right? And I was like, okay, this is like whatever. And I think, when we see this even with other customers, right? Like, it takes a handful of rides to kind of get people over the hump. And then once they do, they're like, oh, I get this.
Yeah.
Right. And I sort of like, I did it enough that eventually I was like, oh, this is pretty fun, right? And I love video games. Like, I've always loved video games. And so once I sort of like started to really perceive Zwift as a game, it was like, then I got into it. And then I started to see the value of it as a training tool, and I enjoyed it. And then, I actually started, choosing to do rides on Zwift just because it was an easier way to get in like a good workout and, make the most of my time. I think all the reasons that, a lot of people, and then I just found that I just really enjoyed it. And so at the time I approached Zwift about sponsorship, I was still racing, and they sort of took a pass on that. And then I talked about maybe writing some coaching content, some workout content for them. And we're sort of in discussion that kind of never went anywhere. But that's how I had ended up sort of, being in discussion with John. The neat thing, right, is like Zwift basically is around because of Slow Twitch, because John Mayfield posted these screenshots, and that's on Slow Twitch. And that's how Eric found him and then met him. And so, I think John was grateful for the role that Slow Twitch played, and the role that, I have, still have actually at Slow Twitch, and sort of managing the back end of the site. And so I think, John sort of said, right, it's like, not interested in sponsoring you or paying you for that other stuff, but might be interested in hiring you as a designer, really with a focus on, I think, sort of the training aspect of Zwift, right? Like, making the training aspect of the platform better. And so that's the role that I have now. And so my role is I'm a game designer, and then my specific areas of responsibility are the training and competition systems, right? So like training plans, workouts, like the race formats, and a lot of that kind of stuff.
Okay. So where do you see it going over the next year? What are some of the things you've got in the pipeline? Because, like I said, I've watched the evolution of this from riding around pretty much on my own with ghosts on the road, and hearing rumors that, maybe we're going to have an opportunity to do timed sections, and maybe we're going to have an opportunity to do races against other people, and maybe we can have meetups. And that's evolved and rolled forward in such a neat way that, it's almost seamless now, and it's hard to remember that it ever, it was just that one little loop that you went round in about 7 minutes. What's coming down the track?
Yeah, I think, there was the answer, right, like a couple months ago, and there's the answer now. It's just very different, right? Typically, we're a relatively seasonal business, right? People ride more, when it's dark and cold. And, typically we would see our peak users kind of the second week in January, right? Like people get a new turbo for Christmas, sort of the New Year's resolution, all of that. I think we hit just under 17,000 peak users, right? Like concurrent users. So 17,000 just under riding at the same time. And we thought that was great, right? We were all kinds of on track. And then, this whole thing with COVID happened. And I think, we recently, passed 35,000 concurrent users, right? Like, which, that never happens, right? Like we have this very kind of nice rolling staircase where, we're sort of always growing, and we kind of know when we're going to kind of like get back. And I think, this has changed everything for us. So I would have given you a very different answer, 2 months ago, this sort of, we're trying to sort of lay some foundation. I think the esports and the racing side of things had started to be a bigger deal, right? Like, we had started having discussions about doing a world championship, e-racing, and some national championships, and I think we were, and Eric has certainly talked about the idea of having it be, a unique discipline, maybe 2028 Olympics. Some of that was derailed by COVID because a lot of the big esports events were supposed to be live venues, right? Like the national championships in a live venue. And those have all been canceled, right? And so I think the idea was that, but now I think you're seeing a ton of sort of high-level elite racing. Then suddenly, sort of the initial part was everything was canceled. And then it was like, once there was nowhere else, everything was canceled. Then it was like, well, there needs to be somewhere to race. And then, I think you can see we have this series of, like real pro races, hosted on GCN and all of that. And so it's sort of been this like, esports is not a thing, and then it's a huge thing, and then it's not, right? So it's sort of like, it's been like everything has been ping ponging back and forth where it changes all the time. And I think we're trying to, so a little bit like, we don't know what's next only because I don't know that anybody knows what's next, right? Like, I think who knows what races will actually happen and when. And so I think from that standpoint, the near term is quite uncertain for us as well as everybody else. But I think, there certainly is, we're starting to see what, elite level racing on Zwift is like. And I think that's important. But I think, it's also, I don't know if you're in we brought the beta group back together with this thing, Club Jarvis, sort of beta testing new features. And if you've just done any of the boost mode events, that was a design that I had that have since has now finally come to life. It's been about a 6-month project of sort of design and development. I think people had a lot of they're sticking e-bikes in Zwift, right? And it's not really, right? It's like you don't get anything for free. It's more that you can charge up this battery, but you actually, you pay a penalty a bit to charge it, right? And then you can, but it does give you some options, right? Like I'm not a great sprinter, but I have quite good endurance. So, right, like I can give myself this extra 500 watts at the end if I'm willing to lug around, right, an extra, like 25 pounds.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. If you watch some of the early streams, people were like, oh, it's going to be e-bikes. And everyone was like, that's the hardest workout that I've done in, eons. And I think, so, it's both, right? There is a appetite, I think, for more traditional bike racing. But then there's also, we want to make, Zwift racing unique and different and not just like, a cycling simulator. So I think we're trying to advance both sides of it. And then, of course, also make sure that, elite racing is better, but then community racing is better. I think we'd like to, move to a more like a proper categorization system, where you can be like a cat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rather than just a sort of fixed A, B, C, D, people moving up and down. And I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about is sort of this idea of, giving people categorization, sort of pulling that in from the real world, but then also pulling in sort of this idea of what I call specialization from the video game industry, right? Where you sort of think like if you play any of the other MMOs, right? Like, oh, I'm a spellcaster, oh, I'm a, barbarian or whatever, something like that, to lean in, more to the idea of sort of power-ups and, that we more power-ups, I think, sort of specialized power-ups, if you can only like I'm a climber specialist, and then you could have a super feather, right, which lasts, 3 times as long or drops twice as much weight. So I think, making sure that we're advancing both of those, both having a better system of sort of traditional categorization, and then also more, I think, kind of gameplay. So trying to kind of get more of the best of cycling and then more of the best of video games, both.
Yeah. It's a different thing, isn't it? That's the thing I understood watching. My son is 8 and I had Zwift on and he came around and saw it for the first time. And before I knew it, the new kicker that I'd bought, he was having me set up his little road bike on so he could ride around on Zwift next to me. And I'm on the crappy old turbo still doing my workout next to him. And he immediately got the gamification of it. He was, what does that feather mean? What does this do? Oh, right, I get that. So I like the fact it's not just recreating bike racing. It's this whole other thing, and the gamification of even the stuff down to, being able to unlock new kit sounds ridiculous, but I can remember doing extra hours on the bike just to unlock a pair of Zip 808s for my avatar to ride around on the early days. So it's anything that can encourage people to do a bit more work is got to be a good thing, right?
Yeah, and I think, part of it is that we've tried to say, how can we make sort of indoor riding and game, make cycling more of a game to appeal to the traditional cycling audience. Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting, like I'm quite an avid gamer and like, watching some Twitch streams and things like that. And it's like, there's a lot of video games that like I quite enjoy playing it, but I see these guys, right, and it's like, I want to be like, dude, you've been sitting in your chair for like 7 hours straight.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I think there is a part of me that also wants to say, like, there's a huge opportunity to speak to the video game crowd and say, like, hey, I'm not saying that you shouldn't well, I mean, I might, but I'm sort of broadly saying, right? I'm not saying you should, spend 12 hours, right, playing Fortnite, but maybe rather than playing 12 hours playing Fortnite and then, on 7 cans of Monster, right? And then that's all you do. Like you could also maybe ride a bike or do something else, right? And I think there is a huge opportunity for people that love video games to say exercising can be a game too. And I think getting some of these, kids and young people to at least okay, maybe go from, 10 hours of Fortnite to 9.5 and then 30 minutes of Zwift. Right, I think you look at some of these big esports tournaments, right? I think where they have a lunch break and stuff like that. I think it would be awesome to see some of those guys that are not world class athletes, but on some of the more game type modes, to have a lunch break thing be a 30-minute Zwift race at something like a League of Legends, big esports tournament, to encourage kids, right, to be active, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I think is maybe unrealized, right? We're such a sort of cycling focused product, right? It's how do we make cycling more of a game, right? And I think you could also say that how do we make gaming more fitness oriented?
Yeah.
And I think I'm equally as excited about that. In large part, I think, from a sort of health and wellness standpoint of, if these, I'm not saying that esports, and kids, right, that they need to, become hardcore cyclists, but I think, if you could get them to spend, 20 or 30 minutes a day exercising, I think that would be a huge win. And we know that they love gaming, right? So it's I'm not exercising, I'm playing Zwift.
Yeah,
right? I think that
totally.
would be fun.
Yeah. Well, one thing we've really noticed during the last 6 to 8 weeks in particular during this whole COVID thing is just how good it's been at bringing the athletes that we coach together in terms of, getting them all together on Zwift at the same time, running Discord on our phones and all chatting to each other. And it becomes like a social ride on the social ride ones. On the workouts that we do, it can be people encouraging each other in between the intervals to keep on going. It's a really great way to bring people together at a time when people can't get out and do any kind of meeting up with people in the usual real world. And we've seen the numbers massively jump on the weekly podcast power hour ride that we do at Tuesdays at 7:15, where the numbers have grown to 120, 130 people online together doing a group workout, which is just amazing that you get people from all over the world coming to try one of your workouts. Because frankly, from a coaching business point of view, what other platform gives the opportunity to let people try something before they buy it effectively and see if they like the workouts and how it affects them?
Yeah, I think, we could do more for groups. I think just kind of piloting clubs as another beta feature, do more for coaches. I think, allow coaches to kind of connect more easily with clients around the world and all of that. I think there's so much that I think we're seeing that we can do. And I think the hard part right now is, right, I think it's a blessing, but, it's a challenge certainly as well, right? Because more than doubled, number of users and sort of demand, but we definitely did not double, our engineering resources in that same time. And so I think it's trying to figure out, what can we get out the door, quickly, and, that's not sort of wasted work, and, what should we prioritize, over some, what else? And I think that's, it's also exposed, some of the bugs and flaws, in the program, and making sure that, we're addressing those things, right? I think, we had done simulated load tests up to 50,000 users, but a simulated test is not the same as, almost 50,000 users, actual users, right? It's a little bit different. So I think it's been a great stress test, and it's still a great stress test, and it's, pushing us both to be better as a sort of core platform and to be more innovative. And I think, there's no shortage of good ideas, and I think it's, what do we do when? And, I think, if we had unlimited time, I think John always used to say, right, people is this possible? And John was fond of saying, anything's possible enough time and money, right? But and so I think that's the hard part, right? Is that there is no shortage of great ideas, and I think it's what do we do when, and that is not an easy decision.
Well, man, that seems like a good place to leave it. I think it's let's leave you to mull over what the future holds for us on Zwift. It's been great catching up with you, man. I've wanted to have you on the show for years, and it's been great to hear some of your stories. So thank you very much for taking the time to come on and talk to us.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's nice to, I say there's still some fringe benefits of a career that spanned quite a long time. That it's funny though. I'm glad to be what I am now. I think there's a young woman at work and someone who is sort of chasing, I think, a little bit of the triathlon dream. Someone said, "Oh, you should ask Jordan. He was a pro triathlete," and she's young and she came up to me. She's like, "I heard you were a pro. Did you have much of a career?" And I was like, and I said, it was all right. And she was like, "That's nice." And I thought, like, this is awesome, right? Like, it's great to just be what I am, to be a game designer at Zwift.
Nice. Well, that's a great place to leave it, man. You're happy with where you are and what you're doing, and you've accomplished some absolutely amazing stuff in the world of athletics. Most of us can only dream of, and now you're creating some pretty amazing stuff so we can all get off our fat backsides and do a little bit of work on the turbo and be entertained at the same time. So thank you very much for that too.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, man.
I'll have to go do my morning ride.
Good stuff. Take care, buddy. Thanks a lot. Great interview there with Jordan. It's a really great opportunity for me to get Jordan on because, like I said, I really enjoyed following his career, and he had such a great blog as he was racing. He posted up so many detailed, not just race reports, but he was really one of the first guys who tinkered with his position and aerodynamics, and a lot of the engineering bits and bobs he came up with, I believe, ended up being put into production by Zip. Some of the sort of between the bars aero bottles, he kind of produced that in his own garage, I believe, if my memory's correct. I didn't get a chance to ask him about that, unfortunately. But yeah, I remember watching him produce all kinds of little threads on Slow Twitch about how he tinkered with little bits of his equipment, and eventually the stuff that he made was better than stuff that was out there at the time. So it ended up going into production, which was awesome. Yeah, so really cool stuff there with Jordan. Great to hear his stories about being a pro triathlete, and also great to hear about all the things that are going on at Zwift. Which brings me smoothly on to gently encouraging you beautiful people to join us on our OxygenAddict Triathlon Power Hour on Zwift. You get to actually try out some of the workouts that I'm writing for our athletes. We all do them together as a group ride, 7:15 p.m. UK time on Tuesdays. Everyone starts together, everyone stays together as a group, no matter how strong or powerful they are. The whole group stays together. As long as your pedals keep moving, you're going to stay in the group all together. And we've got a good bit of chat goes on in the group as well to encourage people along. As I said, as part of the interview, we've had, I think, 125 people on from about 20 different countries last week. Places all over the world, not just like America and Canada and Australia, but we had people on from Guatemala and Guam and places like that. So it's amazing the global reach that the platform has got, but also of the people that have heard of us on the podcast as well. So come along and join us. Give it a go. If you're short of something to do on a Tuesday evening, it's a really great way to make the hours training go by faster. And yeah, that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's show. So come and join us on the podcast ride. If you enjoy what's going on in the podcast ride, you can come and join us as a coached member of Team Oxygen Addict. Remember, we've got the offer on at the moment that if you join during May 2020, we're going to extend an annual membership all the way through to September of 2021. So no matter what happens in terms of racing this year, you can effectively look at it as 4.5 or 5 months of free coaching to get you through this season, get you all the way through October through to February and build some really strong bike power, and then race into 2021. Hopefully when things have returned back to normal again. So yeah, come over and check that out. There's a link in the show notes to join up and come join the team. It'd be awesome to have you as part of our coached athletes team there. Also, thanks very much to our sponsors, Precision Hydration. Remember, use the code OxygenAddict15 to get 15% off your first order. And thanks to Thriver.co, you can use the code OxygenAddict10 to get 10% off all the subscriptions for your at-home health tracking finger prick blood tests. So until next week, everybody, remember there's links to all of those in the show notes, so you don't have to remember them. Until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. See ya.